Hey, welcome everybody. Hey, guess what? We have a special edition tonight because unfortunately, well, it depends how you look at it. Kyle's taking a little vacation. He's taking a little time off and he's left me alone. But I decided I don't really want to be alone. I'm not really a loner. So I brought in a special friend for us tonight. You guys might remember him, Thomas Westbrook. Holy Kool-Aid. Yes, that's my big surprise for tonight. Yay. Hi, Thomas.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And well, thanks for coming by short notice. I was like, panicky. I'm like, okay, who's the best person to get? I'm thinking I needed somebody that might know a little bit about biblical stuff because we have a couple people on tonight to talk about well, Bible stuff. So we're going to get into that in just a second before I introduce the guest. But I do want to do a little housekeeping first, if you guys don't mind. Just recently, I had watched a channel by the name of James Freeman. If you guys know who he is, he's a First Amendment auditor that we've had on and we plan to have on again. And he did a follow-up on the episode that we were talking about this cop who got 90 days for rape, and he put a video out today giving a lot more exposition on this particular topic, including the history of this particular cop. And he had a guest on that actually was getting 90 days from this cop. This cop arrested him for actually writing on the sidewalk with chalk, and they gave him 90 days in jail for writing on the sidewalk with chalk. Same cop arrested, you know, the one that was did this horrific act of having custodial rape. He arrested this person for writing on the sidewalk with chalk, and the judge gave him 90 days as well. So if you guys are not outraged by this, something is seriously wrong. But go watch James Freeman's video. It is in the video description, and he has a call out. I don't know exactly what he, you know, where he wants people to call and what to do to get involved. But I'm really outraged by it because I'm just amazed.
I know
that
this is completely irrelevant, but what did he write on the sidewalk?
You know what? I'm not quite sure. I had to go away for a minute because Kyle always has perfect hair, so I wanted my hair to be perfect today. I'm having a great hair day, and so I had to step away to do my hair. You're welcome, people. And so I didn't hear what he wrote. Now I think there was something a little more egregious than hopscotch. But
was it like donut stuffers get fucked?
I think it was something like "fuck the police," because that's his whole shtick. So there probably is a little more story to it, but still. Oh, he wrote the lyrics to "fuck the police." Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Smitty. So, well, there you go. But anyways, let's get into the discussion tonight. Tonight we have with us a former atheist turned pastor, Jeff Grupp. He is somebody who actually is into philosophy and theology, and he's going to kind of be talking about his experience from going from atheist to a theist. And on the other side, we got back Destiny. If you guys remember Destiny, he's been with us before to have these kinds of discussions. But let me introduce Jeff first. Jeff, welcome to the NonSequitur Show.
Thanks. Really appreciate you having me on. Glad to be here.
You looking forward to this? Because, I mean, you're in a whole hangout here with like 3 non-believers, so I'm going to make sure that you don't get beat up too much, but we're going to have a fun discussion, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a number of years ago, but I was you know, I was a hardcore atheist. A lot of people say, oh, you're, you know, depressed all the time when you're an atheist. That wasn't the case with me. I remember being always sort of, well, it's sort of in the later years of being an atheist, I was always sometimes disturbed by the finality of death, but it was more of an inspiration, a spiritual, and not a spiritual inspiration, a metaphysical inspiration. You know, just like, wow, it's so amazing. My life is that sometime I won't exist anymore. I was just sort of kind of became consumed by that. Sometimes maybe I was a little bit disturbed and a little bit down about that, but really, when I was an atheist, it was I loved it, being an atheist. I felt real. You know, I knew who I was, and it was when I was in my 20s, about 23. My dad pulled me out of college because I wanted to study philosophy, and he said, no, I want me to study computer science and stuff like that, which didn't work for my personality. And I left college and kind of just wandered around and did my own thing. It was actually pretty positive. And you know, then I started really reading a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have been reading otherwise. Henry David Thoreau was one that really influenced me to a big degree, and a bunch of other people I could list. And I became an atheist about 23. And then I went back to school supporting myself. I got an undergrad degree in anthropology and philosophy double major from New Mexico, and then went to Western Michigan, got a master's in philosophy under Quentin Smith, who's a pretty well-known, if you're not in philosophy, you might not know who he is, but he co-authored a couple books with William Lane Craig, which I'm sure you guys are probably pretty familiar with him as debate sort of style books. But I studied under him, getting my master's, and then I went to Purdue for a PhD, and I kind of ran out of steam. I could, finish my dissertation, but I didn't finish the PhD. But I was teaching. I didn't want to become a full professor because, whenever I talk, my dream was to get in and do research, and that's all I cared. I thought I was in philosophy for. I wasn't in for the money, that's for sure, and I wasn't in for the
there's
fame.
no money in philosophy.
Yeah. We always had a joke that everybody's got a job when they're done with their degree as a homeless philosopher. So, so I was teaching as an adjunct, and then I actually ended up getting a tenure track job at the University of Michigan Dearborn teaching critical thinking and metaphysics. But I quit that job to do with a disagreement I had with the school about how they. Well, this isn't the only reason. I caught a student plagiarizing. I didn't like how they handled it. And it was kind of a little bit of an uproar because it was obvious they kind of decided with the student to keep the high paying tuition or something. It seemed like to me, and so I left and just on the assumption I can just get a job somewhere else if I wanted to. But I have only taught really one semester. That was in 2013, and I only really have taught a little bit at the University of Detroit since. But now I had moved over to the other side of the state of Michigan, anyways. But I stopped. Atheism kind of faded for me a bit in 2006-7, where I started becoming interested in the idea of could you prove logically with a lot of stuff I was studying. Some of the things I was studying in philosophy sort of made the question of could there be a mind that created everything or is creating everything now sort of an interesting question. I didn't really like the question because I was an atheist, and that's what I was very at home there, but I started entertaining the idea in my mind, just sort of a project of could you logically prove there's a mind that created reality. But it really, I really kind of basically stayed more or less atheist until a little bit after 2010, and that's when I had a very quick conversion to Christianity, and that's why I'm here today.
Like the question. Were you an atheist or an anti-theist?
We got a little echo. We got a little echo there, Thomas.
Yeah. A lot of people listening can say, oh, you weren't really an atheist. That I think I was. Especially there was a couple years there, 2000 when I was 27 to about 36, so about 97 to 2006, where I published a paper in the journal Sophia trying to prove developing a new argument for God's non-existence. Does that mean I'm an atheist? Was a pure atheist, or if there was such a thing? I don't know, but I think I was. That's all I can really say to answer the question. Some people may say, well, if you're a theist now, you never really were an atheist. That's fair, if somebody wants to say that.
Well,
sorry,
that
go
makes
ahead.
sense. There are people that convert to theism after from atheism and vice versa. But let's get Destiny kind of in real quick, so he can kind of introduce himself first, and then we kind of dive into maybe what you were saying and his interpretation of it. No problem. Destiny, hi, welcome back.
Hey, what's up?
You came back for more. I'm surprised.
Yep, here I am.
And so enthused too. No, go ahead. Destiny, introduce yourself. People may not have seen you last time here, and then if you just want to dive into what he said, be my guest. I don't think it's a big deal for an atheist to become a theist or a theist to become an atheist, but I do find it interesting what converts somebody like that. What is the reasoning by which they say, "Okay, I'm going to change my whole theological perspective"?
I mean, I can't answer that for him. It depends on. I mean, he has to answer that. I don't know why he would change. I mean, I grew up Christian, Catholic to be specific, and then I went through high school and I started to become a little bit less Catholic, a little bit less religious, and then I guess my personal growth from age 16, 17 onwards kind of pointed towards atheism, and I've just kind of been here ever since.
Okay, so let's just kind of tackle this then. So, Jeff, you were would you say that you're an atheist for the most part of your life? Because there's this narrative that people are born atheist. I totally think it's bunk. People are not born atheist. You're born innocent. You don't know anything about the proposition, so you can't say I'm atheist or theist. You have to make these decisions, and a child is not going to make these decisions on their own. So would you say that that you're maybe more of a functional atheist, or you're an atheist? And then what happened along the line for you to say, hey, you know what? I now believe that there's a deity of some kind.
I don't know if this makes. Let me kind of add two segments there. Let me try to hit both. I think I was a nihilist, not in a negative sense. I really liked the idea of not necessarily destruction or something, but just being against society a bit. I remember there was, I really promoted that a lot when I was teaching in colleges, a couple of different colleges, and one of which I didn't anticipate saying this, so I guess I don't have my thoughts. I was very nihilistic. Government should be anarchistic. There should be no centralized control. Even from my political views and everything. I published a paper on what the philosophy called mereological nihilism, and that's the idea. That's on my website, praiseandlove.net. So is the other one that I referred to. And mereological nihilism, I published that in 2006. I wrote it kind of 2001 to 2005 and published it in 2006 in a journal called Axiomathes. And that is the idea that there only are atoms. And somehow, maybe you can say atoms and minds. There's been a number of philosophers who have held this view, especially in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. I was a Buddhist at the same time as I was a Zen Buddhist, but I also like Indian Buddhism at the same time as being an atheist. And yeah, so when you're looking at this pen right here, the pen is your mental construction, but all there are is patterns of quanta, patterns of atomic activity. And when I say atomic, I don't mean the scientist atoms. I mean the actual partless pieces of energy that are flashing out of existence. So not at all different. Definitely not different from what people refer to as like the field of virtual particles, but not necessarily the same either. I was trying to philosophically study that rather than scientifically. We kind of did both a little bit, but anyways, so that's what I mean by nihilism. I just kind of really lived the philosophy I was studying. It was great. I still do that now, but it was different then, obviously. So, okay, so then the second part of your question is, what in the world, going from all this, some people might be thinking kind of cool stuff, to boring Christianity, right? Yeah, that kind of hit me over the head like a sledgehammer. To get right to the point, and feel free, anybody, to take as many shots at this as you can, because I'm not going to have a lot of scientific defense for this, or none. Long story short, my wife got in a car crash in 2000. It was a little bit after 2010. A bunch of events started happening. It lasted about four months, and they centered around me all of a sudden seeing some things, some weird, having some weird apparitions. What you would call hallucinations or visions or whatever. And they started becoming more and more predominant, and they were incredibly, to me, I thought I was going crazy. They were incredibly filled with terror. I was genuinely scared of what in the world that I was experiencing. And then they started to kind of become a little more focused through this 4-month period. And I started to kind of not just feel them, but see them. And it would happen in episodes during the day, and it started to become more and more prevalent. And during this time, I was having dreams about my wife getting in a car crash and becoming more and more vivid. I had 4 very clear dreams, exactly of our Jeep getting hit in the back corner. There was tremendous illness that came over my entire family during this time. And then all of a sudden, there was this, that she gets in a car crash. And this is at the time, all these visions and so forth I'm seeing are absolutely coming to, I was calling mental institutions saying, I need help, And then, so she gets in this car crash that I had told her is going to happen and everything. So I go down to the scene. Fortunately, none of my 4 kids were hurt. And I knew that actually also was contained in the dreams I had. And they weren't just dreams. Some of them were waking visions, but the dreams were much more vivid, of the car crash specifically. The beings and creatures that I was experiencing were more waking. There was no drug use involved. I've been a non-drinker since a little after high school. But anyway, pardon?
Does your wife drive like a maniac?
No, no. It was the other person's fault. It was a texting teenager. My wife was stopped. The texting teenager didn't stop, and it was 3 cars. There was a car in the middle, and the car in the middle hit my wife because the one in the back was the texting teenager, and our Jeep was basically totaled. So it was You know, it could have been gone differently. The car in the middle was very seriously, that woman was injured, but she's very fortunate not to be dead. So long story short, so it's kind of a chaotic scene at the car crash, and police and the driver of the texting team tried to pick a fight with me and another person. It was insane. And so then that all calms down. I get home.
I do love this. A long story short, 20 minutes later. No,
yeah, sorry. Okay, let me get to the point. Everything.
By the way, I do agree with you on mereological nihilism. I happen to be a big fan of mereological nihilism. So just FYI, I'm not saying that I accept it, but I think it's a brilliant way to approach certain things like ship of Theseus and things like that. So I'm
still on that one.
There's about 1.5 million points in your story where I want to jump in and I want to hold your feet to the fire a little bit, but at the same time, I know that this is you versus Destiny, and I don't want to hog the mic, but he seems like he's a better listener than me. I get antsy after a little bit.
He's taking notes. He has his pen and paper, and he's just writing this stuff down. Yeah. Look at Destiny. He's going at it right now.
Oh, I know he's gonna have his turn, and when he does, he's probably gonna come all out swinging.
Yeah, just sum up. Stop belaboring this.
Sure, go ahead.
You mentioned that you had a dream or a vision of your car getting hit.
Yeah.
How many days have you gone without having your car hit between like your vision and this happening and stuff? Like it seems like a really strong case of confirmation bias of waiting for there's all the days it doesn't happen, and then all of a sudden it happens, and it's like, oh, that I dreamed about that must be confirmation. We're pattern seeking creatures, and I don't know. I find that if you're going to be remotely skeptical, that's extremely unconvincing to me.
Okay. I don't know the time frame.
Accidents aren't rare. Like, they happen all the time.
Right. Yep. Yeah. All I can say is what I can say. And I don't have any proof of any of this. This is all testimony. I mean, the dream was specifically in the back corner of the Jeep, and that none of my kids would get hurt. And I remember, so you could sort of see the when a dream is you only have certain. I couldn't see the back or anything. I could see the Jeep though, how it was damaged, and I told my wife about it. She was sort of freaked out for about a week, and very, very terrified that I told her about this. And I was getting kind of very weird at the end. I was saying, I was getting kind of, like a mentally ill person would act. Don't go on these roads. I was always worried when she was driving, telling her not to go on. Don't go on that country road. Go on this busy highway. Drive. I was acting like crazy, crazy. And then it all happened. And then the night of the crash, when everything settled down a little bit, and when we got home, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not seeing all this crazy stuff coming out of mirrors and everything. Was I going? And for the first time in about 4 months, I rationally thought about what in the world I was seeing, because I was absolutely filled with terror. When you're filled with terror, you don't think. Fear, is not very good for critical thinking. And then I immediately realized what I had seen was, there were just some Old Testament style entities to do with, what the Bible would call a spiritual war. And specifically one I sort of had an epistemological connection to, and I knew it was sent from Christ. And I can get into that more later, but I probably should leave it at that.
No, let's not leave it at that. Well, you said that you knew.
Well, we can.
That's kind of a strong jump to say that. That's a strong jump to say that you knew, because if you're saying that, you're a smart guy, and for you to say that you had these visions and this fear that seemed irrational, and then something happened that happens every day all around the world, and that was your confirmation that God, I don't see how that couldn't be confirmation that, there's psychic phenomena, or that you live in the Matrix and there was a glitch and you somehow saw something that was programmed that hadn't occurred yet, or like there's a million different ways that you could have taken this. How did you all of a sudden know that was God? And then I'll shut up and I'll let Destiny go at it.
It was, that's great. That's exactly the right question. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you might as well go ahead and finish everything before we start. I mean, if we
let's go ahead. Then let's definitely jump in, because real quick, I've experienced what you've experienced before, and I will talk about that later on toward the end of this. But I know what you're talking about, and I believe everything that you just said. By the way, the experiences you've had, I believe totally you've experienced them. So, because I have as well. But I think we have drawn different conclusions. But finish your train of thought, and I do want Destiny to definitely expound upon this a little bit.
To answer what that's the question. What he's asking. I had a certain epistemological, like right now I'm awake. My epistemological experience tells me I'm awake. I'm not, and when I'm dreaming, my epistemology tells me I'm in a dream state. The epistemological setting of interacting with these entities was sort of maybe a notch up over waking state, and you had an interaction with specifically the one entity where it was not where it's as if our inner minds were aware of each other, and I knew that entity was an entity from heaven sent by Christ, and it was just an epistemological awareness. That's all I have. I mean, you guys are gonna be able to pick this apart all night, but I mean, that's all I've got. That's just a testimony, and we all know testimonial experience is not scientific. So what I just gave you is a non-scientific story.
Okay, Destiny, floor is yours.
Wait, so I don't understand what the purpose of this conversation is, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think what's happening is, I mean, it's just a discussion about why people actually believe what they believe. I mean, obviously, I do agree that you've had these experiences. I've had similar ones. I've seen entities, right? I'll just put it that, which I come to the conclusion they're all in my head, that not in a mental type of thing, but you have hallucinogenic states, you have hypnagogic hallucinations, you have audio hallucinations. These things do happen, usually due to sleep deprivation more than anything else, but they do happen to people. People have lucid dreams. Nothing in my experience has ever gotten me to the point where I say my conclusion follows from the premises that because I experience these things, ergo God. Never have I reached that conclusion from those types of things. And I think it's maybe hard for people that never have these experiences, right? People that don't lucid dream, they may not realize how vivid these things can actually be. But the question it's
not
good.
Okay, hold on.
Sure, go ahead.
It's not so much that the problem is that like we're okay, hold on. I'm trying very, very hard to be nice when I say this. For somebody that
you don't have to be nice. These are big issues. Just nail me.
Well, I mean, for somebody to say that you've gone as far as to have completed a master's in philosophy and then to try to justify some philosophical worldview based on some dreams or whatever, or some personal evidence, but you haven't used like any form of rationality to get there, that's very strange to me.
I don't have
I could very easily.
I don't have any.
What?
I don't have any. I have no.
Wait, so why did you?
Nothing.
Yeah, but why did you waste so much time studying philosophy to just talk about your dreams and then to let those guide the rest of your life? Like, it seems like you wasted a lot of your life studying something that I think is worth studying, but it seems like none of those intellectual pursuits served you.
That's a great question. I don't know. Because you're right. I was really. I mean, I'm an intellectual now still, but study theology. I don't have any. I had an experience that sort of obliterated anything that I experienced before and shattered any. We all had this, to some degree, but not. I mean, you read a new book and you learn about a new science and it blows your worldview. It was sort of like that, but in a degree where it could overturn anything I ever, make me leave behind anything else I'd previously thought or experienced or believed.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's
we
all
can have these radical life-changing experiences. I've had one of these before, but you can come back down to earth and then try to analyze that through a better lens, a more rational lens, rather than just take that one experience and let it become guiding to your life when it means nothing external of your own mind. Let me be clear when I say means nothing of your external mind. It's possible that we can have an insane experience in our heads and then later on revisit that and say, well, what are the chances that this is pointing to some sort of external truth? I have a lot of tools that I can use to verify that. For instance, I believe I was communicated by angels or demons and all this, and I felt that at one point in time. But now looking back, what type of tools can I use to investigate this phenomenon? And upon, arriving at no answers, I think it's more reasonable for a rational person to say, well, maybe these were just delusions I experienced at the time or some other form of trickery that I wasn't, completely cognizant of. I think that that's still within your means. So I guess the question is, why embrace the delusion rather than using kind of the rational tool set that you're equipped with to try to investigate what happened to you in the past?
The epistemology of the experience told me that it had to be real. And it was wasn't
the experience told you that you had to abdicate all reason. Is that
how do you self-justify that? I believe very strongly that beliefs need to be justified, but you can't say my belief is justified because my vision told me that it should be justified.
I don't.
You see things
I'm not here to tell you guys that my belief is justified. It's my belief should be unjustified to you guys because there's no proof. There's no.
Yeah, so like I don't care about justifying it to us now. I'm obviously we're way past that in the conversation. I guess my concern is because right now, like you are in a state where I would consider you to be somebody that's delusional. So you've had an experience that's happened to you. You have tools that it sounds like you're cognizant of. So when I say tools, I'm talking about methods of investigation. So like collecting data, doing research. It seems you're capable of doing these things, but you've had an experience that thus far defies your explanation, and you've let that shape your entire life. Why not revisit the experience and try to come to a more reasonable conclusion, especially given your academic background? That's what I don't understand.
Well, why would you're assuming that the experience is another more reasonable? Why is a more reasonable conclusion? You mean, something more scientific, something to, brain chemistry, etc. Why would that be more reasonable than the experience was real? And I was experiencing
the way
real
that I justify this. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the experience. So, at the end of the day, what we experience ourselves is as real as anything will ever be. That's just a de facto truth, and I acknowledge that. However, it's possible that I think that we can look at some experiences that we have and say that these experiences are probably more real than these other experiences. So, for instance, if you experience, say, a big psychedelic trip of drugs or a very powerful lucid dream, it's possible that while you're within that state, that feels as though it's the realest thing you've ever experienced. But once we've left those states, I think it's totally possible to analyze those prior states and say, well, this one probably wasn't real. I was asleep at the time, so it's more likely that that was a dream than another dimension. Or I was under the influence of some powerful drug, so it's more likely that was drug-induced rather than, a totally real thing. I think we have the tools to do these types of investigations, no?
I've got some experience with psychedelics from my teens and 20s. Actually, quite a bit in my 20s. And that was during the early parts of the first half of my atheist experience, and it was really an exploration. The whole idea, if you want to explore yourself, do a psychedelic, and my experience, I remember being in those states, looking at those. You see things, especially when you close your eyes. You see a lot of visions and landscapes and creatures and stuff. And I remember thinking every single one of these that are cool, but they feel fake. They feel not real. They have epistemology where they just feel like an imaginary piece of my consciousness.
Sure, but I mean, like you can take enough of any of those psychedelics for that experience to feel more real to you than anything you've ever felt in your entire life. Like, I mean, that's possible as well.
I've heard that I've not done DMT, but I've heard people on DMT saying that. Sorry.
I've never tried any psychedelic, and I've experienced landscapes. I've experienced being on other quote unquote planets or whatever. I've experienced creatures that didn't exist. I think that these things are brain states. And I think that Destiny is making a wonderful point, the same thing that Thomas kind of brought up earlier. You don't have to justify it to us, right? Your beliefs are justified to yourself, right? Unless you're making a persuasive argument, then you have an epistemic burden to try to persuade somebody. But if you're just having a self-assessment or an autobiographical belief, you don't owe it to anybody, but you owe it to yourself. So I think they make a point is, what do you think makes this rational belief that you are attributing it to a deity rather than a more naturalistic cause?
Yeah, great. Yeah, good way to put it. I think that any idea of it being irrational. Yeah. I think that the idea of, how can I rationalize, come up with a rational explanation and all that is all trumped by the epistemology of what I experience, which can't be conveyed. And you can't describe the feeling of love. It's ineffable.
Sure. So
epistemology is hard to explain, but I think it trumps the logic.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Yeah, so let's get past all this. So so I understand. I'm okay. So tell me if there's an accurate summary of what you're saying, because I think I understand it pretty well. You have had an experience, and that experience conveyed more to you than any amount of rationality or logic ever could. That experience to you is one of the most important things in your life, and the idea that somebody would devalue that by saying, well, this form of logic or this rationality is more important than your experience is ridiculous to you, because this is your experience, and how is anyone else supposed to tell you what you should value more than that, right?
No, I don't think it's ridiculous. I think it makes a lot of. If somebody told me this crap I'm talking about, I'd be like, that's great, but I didn't experience it, and it sounds a little bit wacky because I've never seen anything like it. My reality is pretty typical every day, and pretty predictable. And science does a pretty good job in a lot of cases of explaining things without any need for a deity. So I think it was pretty weird. All I can say is that what I experienced was. Had an epistemology where I know it was real, and that is not therefore I just departed any scientific conversation.
Yeah, the problem though is that when people draw inspiration from these sorts of experiences that can't be rationally justified, oftentimes people will begin to reach the normative or the prescriptive from these types of experiences. So for example, say somebody has a delusion where they believe that a demon has visited them and they've communicated some essential command to them that they need to go around the world, stabbing people in the back. It's problematic if we can't communicate with this person using logic or reason, right? When I say logic, I mean using a language to convey an idea that can be empirically verified. This seems to be important for people because we can't communicate our experiences to each other, right? It seems like we can, but we can't really. I can't tell you what it's like to feel pain. I can't tell you what the color red looks like. We have to use logic, right? We use words as proxies for feelings that we can come to understand in a very disconnected kind of way. So for somebody to start drawing, major feelings about their life or to start to form a philosophy around these abstract experiences that can't be conveyed and probably don't exist in a person, seems like it would lead us down a lot of problems in society if people started to draw or normative claims from these types of experiences. That's my worry.
Okay, yeah, and you're right about everything. But what if it was real? What if I experienced something real?
What if?
Because I think I did, but I'm asking you, what if it was real? Because the person that stabbed the person in the back because of being chased by a demon, what if the demon was real? Sorry?
Well, but I mean, if it was real,
Jeff,
the goal would be that there should be some... There should be some empirical way to kind of point to it. I mean, it's possible that there could be supernatural phenomena. Yeah, but we don't make decisions on anything based on faith, right? Faith doesn't...
Go ahead and finish, please. We have a little bit of time.
No. I think I said.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want it to be like a big 3-on-1 dog palace.
Right. I get, and I don't want it to either. But I do think what you said was brilliant, though, Destiny. There is this thing of having this normativity of back several hundreds and several hundreds of years ago, maybe a couple thousand years ago too. When people have these dreams or people have these states, they would attribute it to a demon, or they would attribute it to some evil force or something else other than a naturalistic explanation, right? But as we progressed in time, and it's almost 2019 coming up to, we don't normally, when we see somebody having seizures, think that they're possessed, right? We don't normally think that people that are having lucid dreams are having a dissociative state. So there is a more normative thing now, which is we know that most of the time we can find a naturalist explanation, but it seems like you're taking these experiences and you're going back to those days where they didn't understand a lot about these topics. They didn't understand neurology. They didn't understand biology. They didn't understand that these things are what I do believe now to be totally internalized, not something that is external. And again, it's hard for someone like myself who has experienced these things. It sounds like Destiny has too, by the way. You weren't using hypotheticals, right? You've experienced something similar, Destiny?
So I did a ton of psilocybin mushrooms 6 months ago, and it was easily the most fucking mind-shattering experience of my entire fucking life.
Did you have a video on that? I think I watched. Did you talk about that on your channel?
Oh yeah, I totally fucking destroyed my fucking mind doing it. Yeah, so
I remember listening to that. Yeah, but so what caused you to have a conclusion, though, Jeff, that this was something externalized? Again, that's not a normative thing nowadays. You had to have a reason to justify to have a rational belief. That's epistemology.
I see you now. I see you on the screen, and I think my epistemology tells me that you're real. I'm not dreaming. What I saw. A lot of people don't believe that, though.
I have a lot of people that don't believe that I exist. No. I have. I'm not even kidding. I wrote a blog on my philosophy blog about people that don't believe that I exist. It's been a running joke for a very long time, but there are people out there for whatever reason don't think they have any beliefs. And I made a diagram just recently on some of the stuff. And people that don't have beliefs, I put as solipsism. I didn't know what I might modify a doxastic nihilism, if there's such a thing. But there are people that don't believe that I exist. But when you say that you see these things as much as you see me, the difference is that we have confirmation that right. I'm here. Thomas can see me. Destiny can see me, right? Have you ever had confirmation that some of the other things that you've seen is confirmed by anybody else?
Nope. I mean, the Bible, but so no is the answer. No, it's not science. It's not. It's personal information, not shareable. It's not scientific. So no, by definition, it's not going to be confirmed.
So if there are, if
faith means experience of another realm, not the Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the evidence of things unseen, the experience of things unseen. Not usually people think Christians will come along and talk about faith and say it's like they basically describe something like believing in Santa Claus. That's not. I don't know where Christians are typically misguided about almost everything to do with their own book. Because that's not, belief without evidence is not. We can talk about this later. Not a biblical concept. So when I say faith, I mean experience of the unseen, experience of a dimension that is not verifiable by science. So sorry, go ahead.
I was saying if we had evidence that, like, let's say that you were to take the Bible and you were to scrutinize it scientifically and find scientific errors, if you were to scrutinize it historically and find historical inaccuracies, if you were to search for internal inconsistencies, and you find that this book is not perfect, divinely inspired, in any way by any stretch of the imagination, would that not be enough room to cause some doubts to think maybe if this book is not the most credible, reliable source, that maybe my hallucinations aren't suddenly proof of this God, when there's people in other religions who have other equally fallible books who are coming to similar conclusions after having similar experiences in their cultural frame of reference?
Nope, because I saw what I saw.
To kind of skip over all of this, because we can play Bible games all day. The problem is, ironically enough, a problem of epistemology. So I don't think that there's a phrase, you can't reason somebody out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into. And it seems like what we have is a very strong personal account that is overriding any other type of logic or reason we would use to get there. So, I mean, there's no way that anybody can ever communicate. There's no way that anybody can ever reason you out of this experience. These just are the.
But you do believe he had experience, right, Destiny? You do believe he had experience,
but experiences mean nothing. I mean, everyone's had experiences. The problem is that we can't live our lives using these experiences to dictate how we should live. Or maybe we should.
I think did the experience to note anything or not? I mean, it could have been all hallucination. Was it an experience of something real or not? And the only thing I have is my personal epistemology on that, which,
I'm gonna have to before we move too far past. I want to hold Destiny to something real quick, and that's when you say, like, you can't reason people out of stuff that they weren't reasoned into in the first place. I don't think that that's how reason and logic works. I think that reason and logic are acquired, that they're developed skills that we don't start with, and most of our experiences are not based off of reason and logic, and we develop that skill over time. I know that in my case,
What I'm saying is that if somebody had a very profound experience that shaped their lives and they believed something with all their heart, and that person didn't critically analyze it or logically or rationally analyze it, then it's clear that the way that this person is choosing things that are important to them in their lives, they're using a tool set that is outside of logic or reason. They're going by personal experience, or they're going by an emotional or an intuitive thing. If a person is using these types of tools to acquire knowledge, you're not going to suddenly be able to say, let's take a look at rationality and reason in order to get you out of this position. The person's say, I don't care about any of this. I had an experience. I know what I saw. Whether you can see it or not, or whether I can prove it to you or not, I don't care. That's what I'm saying. It's worthless to attack somebody's position that they've acquired through experience and they value with faith. What?
They can later on. I mean, I think Thomas is right. You don't start off with a position of rationality a lot of times, but you can reason yourself out of it with proper tools. I don't think you can.
But the thing is that we have to go to a higher order than this. You can't use reason on somebody that's not valuing reason in their decision-making process. You would have, if you really want to have a conversation about this.
I'm valuing reason. I do value reason. It's just I'm talking about something that's
I don't think it's being unreasonable. I just think he's unjustified. But that doesn't mean
to be very clear. To be very clear, he is being unreasonable, right? He is interpreting a personal experience he had as being something that actually happened. I'm guessing past his own personal experience. And he's willing to believe that without any sort of empirical evidence, without any sort of rational analysis whatsoever. He's just believing it because it's something that he experienced. So this is something that you have experiential evidence. Which means nothing.
I think he's using his own reasoning, but I don't think he's using evidentialism.
Every single experience that you're having right now is experiential evidence. You have some experiences that I can't. I believe you have thoughts right now. I can't verify that, but I believe you do. Even it's just a philosophy in my mind, but I believe you do it. But I can't justify it, and it's only on my personal belief.
No, we can inductively reason out things like that. These are not all 100% unverifiable.
I can't prove you have thoughts.
You can't prove it. You could deductively reason it. You could say you have thoughts. You are a biological organism. You are very similar to I, so therefore you would inductively reason that I ought to have the same thoughts that you do, or similar thoughts. These are reasonable thought processes. You can inductively reason something without necessarily knowing it, right? This is what induction is. So, but this isn't the same. Just because I can inductively reason something and not deductively know it to be true doesn't mean that I can all of a sudden say, well, also aliens exist, and it could be true. I don't know it, but it could be true. The same way that you could have thoughts. Well, no. In one sense, we can use a reasonable thought process to get there, and then in the other sense, it's a fantastical claim that isn't rooted in any sort of rational thought process at all.
Yeah, it's not.
Do you claim this as knowledge, Jeff?
Pardon?
Are you claiming this as knowledge? I mean, I'm fine with you saying I know I've had these experiences. Those are I'm a big believer in incorrigible beliefs, incorrigible things. I mean, you have these experiences; they're incorrigible facts because of virtue that you've experienced them. So when you say I know that I've experienced it, that's a fact. I have no doubt about that. But are you claiming it as an ontological fact? Are you claiming it as an experience that literally is something externalized? Because I don't think that I'm getting that from you. I think that you're just interpreting it, but you're not claiming it as knowledge.
When you say ontological fact, okay, let me just tell you, what I would say, just let me say it as freely as I could. I experienced another realm of which is described as what is found in the Bible. And it is not going to be something that's ever verified by science, because that's not how the way the world has been set up. It can't be verified by science. Science is empirical and the supernatural world is non-empirical. So therefore you can't detect one from the other. You have to have a breakthrough in consciousness by the supernatural creator. And that's the only way that that's John 6:44. The only way that someone comes to the Father is if the Father draws them.
If the supernatural world did actually interact in any way, shape, or form with the natural world, whether it's through miracles, through dreams, through faith healing, you name it, would the effects of it not be something that we could test empirically?
No, because I don't think so, because the supernatural world should be non-empirical. Unless the supernatural world was another type of physical world, but then why would it be supernatural? It'd just be it'd be like another universe.
Yeah, well, by definition, any supernatural phenomenon that comes using any type of tool or instrument would become not supernatural by that point, because we would have a way to
right.
I agree with you there, Destiny. What I'm just saying is, let's leave aside the word supernatural and just say that everything is natural, including God. Is just paranormal. It's doing some spooky, weird thing outside of our known laws of physics, that it's bending them in some way, that's whether it's a computer programmer and we're in the Matrix and it's changing the code and hacking it, or whether it's some advanced alien civilization that's able to bend the laws of physics. That's something that we should be able to detect if it interacts with us. So if, let's say that you lay hands on someone and you pray over them and they get better when you're praying to a specific deity, and it happens every time, then that would start to be accumulated evidence that, hey, there's something to this. Right? Is that not empirical evidence?
Okay. I like you said something. So talking about the prayer, if prayer is what it says in the Bible, there should be somebody out there who can do it in a repeatable, predictable way. And then there's the next step. If you got to get it in a journal, and then people have to believe it. It's a long way to get from one to the other, but it should be detectable in that way. So in other words, I think what you're saying is we should be able to pick up the supernatural channel through a consciousness, and then the behaviors of the person that has that consciousness should do things that violate the laws of physics, biology, and so forth. So yes, that's essentially the core gospel.
I think you're making a false assumption there. I think you're making a false assumption. If a deity exists of some kind, you're assuming that he's going to allow it to be detected. You're making that by fiat, by saying, oh, well, I'm going to assume if these things are real, that there's some detectability to it. And I don't think that naturally follows. But the same thing is
I think you're right.
If God's going to convince somebody, right? And this is personally from my personal experience. And I was a theist at one time. People know that. But if God's going to convince me again, right? Then these experiences that I've had, and again, I know they're due to sleep deprivation, and they're very vivid, or even self-induced. I've self-induced them a few times. But I would think that a God would be, hey, I know Steve better than anybody on the planet. I know what he needs to be convinced of this. And it's not going to be some kind of thing like what you would say was a vision, or just, dream state. That's not going to be convincing to me. I know Thomas has probably a much higher level, what he would be to be convinced, right? God himself came down in front of him. He'd probably go on, like, okay, dude, demonstrate to me that you're a deity, right? I don't think I have that kind of level, but it's going to take a lot more than what he's given. And I understand the concept of faith, but he's done this before in the past with people. He's supposedly has demonstrated himself to exist to other people historically. And I don't see why it's a pick and choose type of situation where certain people have more personal evidence of his existence than others. But I do see that everybody has experiences. Everybody has very similar accounts. I know from my experiences that I can't reach the state where I attribute it to a deity, because it's just not rational jump in reasoning to do that, as Destiny points out, right? I'm not saying that it's irrational. I think people have their own reasons for believing things. I'm not an evidentialist. I deny Clifford's principle. I'm very fine with prudentialism and pragmatism. But even with those things, I can't get to that point where I can say I am justified to believe in a deity because of my experiences. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, I have to be very precise in my epistemology for a reason.
Yeah, I really like what you said at first. You were kind of checking me. I was thinking, I'm not just saying this after the fact, I was thinking that way. I mean, when you say that the supernatural should be detectable by behavior and blah, 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 through prayer and so forth, it's calling prayer behavior, and then miracle healing's following, then the miracle healing is the detection of the supernatural. Yeah, you're right. Maybe, so that's written down in the Bible. What if, if there was a Christian God and that God didn't want it to be detectable scientifically, because that would be a violation of the idea that the supernatural is a realm of faith, not empiricism. Now that I tend to go that direction, which I think is agreeing with what you're not that this is real, but you're saying that could be what happens. Now, you said, let me tell you something about what you said. I asked for the experience that I had of the revelation of the, everything that happened. My wife became a Christian in 2007. Well, she kind of was before, but real, you can tell. She didn't do any, praying or anything, but she would say she believed in the Christian God and stuff. But then in 2007, she became, all of a sudden she completely changed. And she said to me, she immediately, maybe within a year or so started, why you pray, you're not right. Well, typical things Christian will say. Maybe sort of a weak, not the real, kind of a weaker Christian, being whatever. So she said to me, one time she said to me, why don't you just pray? If it's not real, nothing will happen. If it is, something will happen and you'll find out the truth. Don't you? Because she knew what to say. Don't you want the truth? If it is true, don't you want to know? I'm like, well, of course, but it's not true, is what I said. So this is right before I left on a long car trip, 3 hours. And so I got to I thought about the whole time. I'm like, she's got a good point. I mean, I should at least try this out so I know, and I can't say I never tried it. And then I'm saying something doesn't exist, which I've never, to do the Christian thing, you have to partake. The Bible says the way to be a Christian is you participate in God. That's it's not some blind faith Santa Claus belief like most Christians say, Christians are completely wrong on that. So I did, and I basically just said the first thing I said is, if there's a mind that created everything, I'm talking to you. So I get in this hotel parking lot, and I'm actually, talking to it like I'm talking to you. I'm believing. I mean, I said I'm an experiment here. If there's somebody who created this, I'm talking to you. And what's the deal with this invisible thing? I'm not going to believe you unless you show yourself to me fully. I'm not going to believe what it says in a book. I'm not going to believe testimonies. I'm not going to believe. You have to show me to my eye. I have to see empirically the truth. Now I use the word empirical. Now I would say more now, just to my epistemologically, to my experience in a certain way. But that's what I said at the time. I need to see empirically, or else I'm not going to believe. But if it is true, that I'll go your direction and devote my life to you, because I just want the truth. And then I kind of went on my way, and then a little while, a couple years later, what happened. So I tied the two
but why
together.
Is it a matter? Then why is it a matter of faith? I want my epistemology to be correct. I want my beliefs to be true beliefs. I got some echo. Who? Is that Dave? Dave, is that your end? No, it's gone now.
Is it? Yeah, to put on, or
if you can, it might minimize some of that echo.
That's odd. I wasn't really hearing any before.
Yeah, I didn't either. It's just but it's gone now. So, but I want my beliefs to be correct, right? And I do believe that people have unjustified beliefs. Foundationalism. I'm a foundationalist, so we start off with unjustified beliefs. It's the way it is. But I want the majority of my beliefs to have some justificatory reasons, and I want them to be correct. And I'm not so much into wanting to know if God exists only because you know, I'm worried about salvational issues because I don't believe in a fiery hell. I think that's all bullshit, straight up. But I want to know what is true about the universe. I'm fascinated by the universe. And if God is something that has an ontological necessity in the universe, if he's a metaphysical necessity that the universe is just contingent upon him, I want to know that only because I'm interested in what's true. And God knows that with me, right? And if he really wants to you know, reveal himself to me in a way that I will definitely believe that he exists, he knows how to do it. And maybe I think you're just putting two and two together, and you're trying to get it to be four, and it's not. It's more like 6 or 7 right now. I think you're just making false conclusions. And I'm not saying that you know you're being irrational. I'm not going to go as far as Destiny. I think you have a rational epistemology. People that do have reformed epistemology. Yeah, go ahead.
I know. I hear what you're saying, and yeah, well put. What if it's right though? What if I saw something that you did? Now you're going to say, why did you get to see it and I didn't? Now that leads to a whole different, that basically leads to the question in the theology of Calvinism is why are some chosen? It says in the Bible pretty clearly, some are, you know, it's available for all, but only some are chosen. Why in the world would that be the case? Isn't that a little bit unfair? And we can go there if you want. But
well, go ahead.
Let Destiny jump in first because he's been wanting to.
Okay, so like, so going back, so there are things that we can know, and there are things that okay. So we can get into disagreements on. I'm going to say the word epistemology here on the boundaries of human knowledge. So it's possible, for instance, that a higher power created the universe. It's possible that all of these experiences are true or aren't true. However, these exist outside of the bounds of human knowledge. We can't truly evaluate these things. We can't evaluate our own experience. It's not possible because we can't escape our own experience. Now, that being said, just because we can't evaluate whether or not our own experience is real, or whether or not we're viewing anything of the external world, or whether or not we're being deceived by a demon from Descartes or whatever, whether this is true or not, we can assume that we are. And then based on that assumption, we can start drawing some conclusions about the world around us based on those assumptions. Most people, I would argue, reasonably agree with a lot of these kind of like necessary conditions for human existence. The idea that logic exists, the idea that we can make empirical observations. You know, these are things that we all kind of universally agree on. We have to in order to be able to communicate with each other. Because if all we had were our own experiences, we wouldn't get anywhere. We wouldn't be able to do anything, literally.
That's all.
So
if you're saying we have more than just our own experiences, you're disagreeing with Kant and a couple guys that came, smart guys that came before him, and everybody after. You're locked into your experience. That's all you have.
Yeah, I understand that I'm locked into my experience and I can't justify my experience. But what I'm saying is that we can move past that. We can acknowledge that our own experience is unjustifiable, such that we're truly observing the universe or whatever. And we can move past that, and we can still have conversations, assuming that we have. And that's kind of what we have to do in order to. So, but the problem is that when you start making life choices based on personal things that you've experienced that are empirically not true, it leads to a lot of problems for other people. The problems that cause the destruction of society.
I mean, it's empirically not, I wouldn't say not true. It's empirically not relevant. It's not,
well, it's absolutely relevant. I mean, no, that's not true. You yourself are a pastor. So you've dictated an occupation based on these personal experiences. How can you say it's not relevant?
Not relevant empirically, because there's no empirical evidence for anything.
What do you mean by empirically? When I say empirically, what I mean is that when I use the word empirical, I mean proven by external, like tested, verifiable things. If you're making decisions on your life, or you're making prescriptions, meaning you're saying that a person ought to act a certain way, or that you're going to act a certain way based on unverified, unempirical observations, then, I mean, you kind of have to let everybody else do the same thing, right? Because you're essentially saying, I've had an experience, I can't justify it, but I'm going to live my life based on that experience. If everybody in society did that, it would be a disaster. We have to be able to communicate to each other.
I think everybody is. And it is a disaster.
I mean,
I agree with everything.
I mean, yeah, just like I don't. The idea of a bunch of people running around that have had an experience, you know, where angels have told them to kill everybody, just sounds like a recipe for disaster. Like at some point, you have to be able to say stop. Like we need to have reasonable conversations. We can't communicate to each other if all of us are running off of these strange visions and dreams that are completely and totally unproven or unjustified to anybody.
How do you know I didn't have one that was more powerful than the ones you guys say you've had? Why? What if it was 1,000?
The likelihood that your dream. It doesn't matter. The likelihood that your dream represented anything real versus anything fantastical or delusional is highly, exceedingly unlikely. I'm sure there are
evidence for that claim. How do you don't have any evidence for that claim because it's not you're saying
I don't need
you can't say evidence in respect to what I've said. There's no evidence.
This is level 1 atheism. Like, I don't need to present evidence to debunk your personal fantastical thing that you've experienced in your mind. Obviously, I could never disprove that. But the onus is on you to
explain that, because that sounds to me like a one-on-one critical thinking fallacy. You're basically saying, I don't know your experience, so therefore I can debunk it. You're saying you're going from a negative claim to a positive claim. I don't know something, therefore I know something.
No, what I'm saying is that. So what I'm saying is that you're making a fantastical claim about having visions of the future events. This is a fantastical claim that violates everything we believe right now, based on our investigations into physics and I guess arguably philosophy. So violates everything we believe to be true now, that somebody could have a premonition of the future. You're making the claim that you're able to do that. That is a fantastical claim that needs to be verified. Me remaining skeptical of that claim doesn't require me to put evidence forth of that. My evidence would be our entire body of science thus far says that that's not really a thing that you can ever possibly do. So the onus is on me to provide.
Detectable by science.
But Jeff, we can bring in priors. Holy Cool has done episodes on this, so maybe he can address this particular topic when it comes to psychic abilities, because we have seen in every single case where anyone has ever posited they have any kind of ability to foretell the future or any demonstration of psychic ability, every single time it has failed across the board. And so, if you're going to have an argument, and I believe that it probably will fail every single time.
Sometimes there are incredible hits that are statistical guesses, and that doesn't mean that it's anything paranormal. A great example of this, I did an interview with a former psychic turned magician skeptic named Paul Zenon, and I never published it just because the audio was crap. But in the interview, he talks about how he had this experience where he was making money at bilking tourists out of money by saying, like, I have psychic abilities and I'll read your fortune for this much money. And he went down to the local pub and he did a psychic reading for someone who was a biker. And he saw that this guy, he's got a motorcycle helmet, he's got a bike, the traffic is crazy, and I think it was in like Cyprus or Greece or somewhere. And he's like, I see, some form of like, I see like a hospital in your future or something like that. Kind of this vague, I see an accident or pain, or he said something vague like that. Literally the next day or on the way home, the motorcycle guy got in an accident and he had no clue. He was just guessing. But it was a statistical hit. And because it was a hit, the next day, everyone was lined out the door to see him. And he'll admit, he'll go on camera and he'll be like, I didn't know. It was a complete guess based off of, I saw this guy every time that he would come into the bar, like he was swerving, driving like a maniac. Sometimes it's just, you live in a place where traffic is crazy. If you live in LA, you go a couple years, you're probably going to get in an accident. And he made this determination, and everyone thought that he had this gift or this ability. And all of a sudden everyone wanted to line up and get a reading from him. That doesn't mean it's true.
But all of us would be able to detect that that's just a correlation fallacy. I mean, you three guys and me would know those coincidences happen.
What you're doing.
What?
That sounds like what you're doing.
Well,
I can point to hundreds of people who've had similar spiritual experiences who are, Sufi Muslims or who are Hindus who, they go to some, yogi practitioner on a mountaintop or something. And he tells them that if they, spend a few hours upside down, doing inversions or something, and they're chanting and running in circles, that they're going to experience God, and they have this supernatural experience. On multiple occasions, I experienced sleep paralysis where I actually thought that there were demons in the room. And then after I left my religion, I still had sleep paralysis, but I would have it where, like, you wake up and you have the hypnagogic hallucinations. And when that happens, for me, after that, it was like one time it was zombies were at the door. Another time it was aliens were coming to probe me. And one time it was intruders. None of that is evidence for aliens, no matter how convincing and crazy these experiences were.
Yeah, I've experienced one where I actually saw floating, like a demon in front, like literally floating there. But I wasn't scared at all. I was actually more inquisitive. I was actually fascinated. I'm like, dang, what the hell's going on here? You know what's funny is you never have like a Playboy Playmate floating over you like Animal House, right? Why is that? You know, I never have like these kind of hypnagogic hallucinations for some strange reason. But you know, I've had full-on conversations with people in these states. But again, I've reached the point now where I'm not fearful of any of them. And somebody has actually said, hey, why don't you do an experiment? Why don't you say, in the name of Jesus, blah, 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 which years ago. And I was like, okay, let's try this. Well, I tried it. And basically, even the things I was talking to, like, they're like, what the hell is that supposed to do? And I was like, okay, cool. Let's talk about something else. And so I realized, you know, this stuff is all in the mind. Fascinating, amazing. These hallucinations you can have, and you can self-induce them. I've done it more than 4, 5, or 6 times, but I cannot reach the conclusion they're externalized. And I think that you have, and maybe the 3 of us are going, you still need to justify, not to us, right? Your beliefs, you know, you don't need to justify them to us unless you're really trying to persuade us, but you need to justify them to yourself. And I think you realize that you haven't really met that epistemic standard, have you? I mean, you really do realize it's irrational at that point.
Epistemology involves, you know, we're talking about your consciousness, and my consciousness, like I said earlier, I have an experience right now of you, and I believe you're real. And I can play the I'm dreaming and you're just atoms and all that and stuff. But the epistemology I have is sufficient for me to believe that you're real. The epistemology I had in those experiences was more powerful, and definitely I'm going to make the jump.
You're a neurological nihilist. I'm just a rearrangement of atoms. If you're a neurological nihilist with a conscious.
Yeah, but it forms a pattern that the atoms form a pattern that somehow is presented to my consciousness that I detect as you. You know, whether or not there's, you know, is the flock of birds one thing or 20 things, you know, and you can kind of go either way, but ultimately it's 20 things.
I call them a token. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, token representation. Yeah.
But, sure. Yeah. I agree. Well, I mean, I think what we're at here is I had an experience that I say I'm not going to try to prove it to you, but the evidential evidence, if probably the wrong word, evidential.
That's very satisfying too. To try to cop out that you can't prove that experience to anybody else is very unsatisfying when your job is literally convincing other people to believe your religion or to preach to other people. That seems very strange that you would be of the mindset that it's impossible for you to communicate or justify that experience when that's literally your job.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if I was talking to not 3 atheists, I would talk in a more way, like a different way. And I would just assume everybody else, I could talk about exactly what was seen, and it's just as fact as this pen right here. But I mean, I'm talking to you guys. I got to respect that this is not verifiable information. So that's why I'm talking this way. So you got a great point. I mean, I don't talk about this way.
You got to take that as a properly basic belief in some way that reality is real, right? I mean, you have to function in society. So I have to believe that external minds exist if I really want to be functional. There's a reason why I have a properly basic belief in my foundationalism. I don't see having the need to have a corresponding to a deity that is somehow a necessity to function.
But what if my epistemology, I don't know why that would be led to that, just like my epistemology now leads to me believing you're real. What if the experience somehow or another had the necessary epistemology to get me to believe it? Now you can say it's hallucination, but then I could say also you're a hallucination now.
I mean, you could just, I mean, if you go to the coherentist path, right? If you go to more a coherentism type position, then yeah, I can see what you're saying. I just don't think that it necessarily follows. And so for being a rational person, I'm not going to make that determination that this is a and I hate using the word supernatural. I like the way Thomas put it, because if you just forget the term supernatural, just forget it, right? I mean, if God exists, let's make him natural for the sake of argumentation.
You're talking about non-scientific stuff, so I get what you mean. Yeah, it's an annoying word because you want to talk about observables, not invisible stuff.
Yeah, supernatural doesn't really add anything to our conversation because it's so complicated. What actually would it be? What is the line of demarcation?
In this setting, it's a conversation killer.
Yeah. Well, I think supernatural is a fine word to describe what's happened, because I would argue that we can't have knowledge of supernatural things. It's just not within the purview of what we can examine as humans. So they're things that we ought not to consider. There's no reason for it. There may or may not be phenomena that occur, but we can't interact with these in any way, size, shape, or form, and they have no bearing on the universe that we observe or interact with. So why consider them? There's no reason to.
Well, from science or from the word fantasy?
Pardon?
I said, why not then just substitute it with the word fantasy?
Well, fantasy is supposed to denote some sort of make-believe. where I want to say this was, you know, according to my epistemological setting, it was not make-believe. You could say it is, and that's fair.
Well, but it's by definition, it's an idea that you have in your head that you're not able to independently verify or justify to any other person by your own admittance. What's the difference between this and fantasy, aside from the person preaching fantasy being honest about their belief?
Scientifically, there's no difference. Epistemologically, there's a difference that's only detectable by one person in the world, me.
No, I agree with you.
Which is a problem.
I mean, I'm
actually, that's a problem. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, look at if you guys remember the movie Contact, right? I mean, she was not able to demonstrate that she actually had the experience, and I get that people have their own interpretation of their experiences. I think first you have to start to determine: do you believe that the person had these experiences? I think we all agree that you've had these experiences, but then the next question is, again, do you really have a firm justificatory reason to accept these things as something that has legitimately happened? I've yet to understand your reasoning behind that, and what led you to a specific position in Christianity. I mean, I don't know. Are you a Baptist? Are you a Calvinist?
The latter question
you kind of tend
to is not Calvinist.
The latter.
Calvinist.
What's that, Destiny?
The former question is interesting. The latter one, for how anybody, what religion they specifically choose, is always a really boring discussion. But
yeah, that'll kill the audience for sure.
I don't think so. I'm kind of curious myself.
Well, it's a boring discussion because it's totally absurd. The idea that like you just happen to have an experience and you just happen to live in the right country, that just happen to have the right religion, that you just happen to understand of all the thousands of it's such a fantastically dumb conversation that I don't even know if I could bear to sit through it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a point. I mean, if you have these experiences in another country, would you not then maybe go to whatever the normative religion for that area is? I mean, why are you tending to Christianity if other people have these experiences, they become Hindu or Muslim or some other type of religious denomination?
There's a video called The Insanity of God that discusses people that have had revelations of Christ in Muslim countries, places where they didn't know who the guy is with the holes in his hands, for example. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, there's the idea that the Jewish boys become Jewish, the Christian boys become Christian. You know, the ones in the Hindu culture become Hindu. I mean, I think that's where you're getting at. There are exceptions to that. You guys are hitting some questions that I could answer, but I'd have to get at least a 1 minute prerequisite of describing some things about Calvinism I can answer. I don't know if you want to go there or not, but that can explain why some are chosen, some are not. You know, the people in the Hindu country are where God put those people there because they were not chosen, and the people that were killed in such and such war before they knew, that's basically the idea. And so you might say, well, that's not fair. And the idea is, let me try to explain it in 20 seconds.
No, wait, okay, hold on. I can't bear it. I can't bear this conversation.
Understand.
Now we're going from your own fantastical delusions in your head to now trying to ascribe some values to a god that all of this is completely fantastical. Like, I would rather somebody talk me through like the 17 gods in Lord of the Rings for how they like there's absolutely no, like, it would be more interesting to start the conversation at like, why do you believe that this is true? Aside from I read it in the Bible, like, rather than go into like whatever fantastical story Calvinists tell people about whatever god they particularly believe in.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point because here, look at it this way, Jeff. Let's assume that you had never read the Bible. Let's assume that you have no knowledge of any of that stuff.
He's already appealed to this. He's going to say that there are documented evidences of people all over the world. He already alluded to this, that people have come to find Christ without even knowing who he was.
Well, hang on. No,
I don't think those are scientific. There's just people that say that happen. I don't know if it's true or not.
No, my question was going to be
those holes as someone who grew up overseas in the Muslim world, and I heard stories like that and stuff, and I know people who had stories like that. Can I take those holes in Jesus's hands and fill in the holes real quick? So I have been everywhere from Afghanistan to Kyrgyzstan to Russia, you name it. I do not know a single culture that is not familiar with who Jesus is, except for maybe the North Sentinelese, and they killed the last guy that tried to talk to them. And
I'll be honest, when I watched the video the same, I'm like, really? There's somebody didn't know that? Yeah, I hear you. That's a legitimate objection. So I had the same.
Every place that I have ever been, whether it's Southeast Asia or Europe, it doesn't matter. like people at least have heard of him because he's all over pop culture. You know, whether it's the Passion of the Christ and, you know, all the news that it makes, or whether it's, you know, people aren't stupid. They're not living in like this bubble where they're completely oblivious to the fact that there's 2 billion people on planet Earth that believe in Jesus and God. If they have any education whatsoever, or if they have any, you know, ability to read or access to the internet or access to TV or anything, like they've at least heard rumors. And that's all you need to have visions. That's all you need is a tiny little seed.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's in your head, your brain can run with it.
But here's the thing. Again, what if he didn't experience anything with the Bible or for what people have told him? What could he come to the conclusion of a deity or Christianity or especially Calvinism if he'd never been exposed to any of that stuff? As something like, for instance, like science, we all like science here. If we never got exposed to somebody like Einstein, we still, if we were smart enough, we could come up with something like the theory of relativity, right? If we never understood or never heard of Darwin, we still could come up with something like evolution. We have the ability to determine a explanation for something by looking at evidence. What could you determine that this would be the case, that is more likely the case of your beliefs now, without appealing to the Bible or anything that you heard from other people? How would you take a step-by-step going, okay, this is what I experienced, let me get to this conclusion?
Well, that's what I said earlier. There's nothing, okay, rather than short explanation, one of the specific entities that I had the most interaction with, which I was terrified about, but it also conveyed information to me of who it was, and it was a being sent directly from Christ. It was sort of a part of the epistemology of knowledge. It's not the entities I interacted with, that specific one. It wasn't like you. I interact with a face, and I don't know your thoughts. I can't see your thoughts and so forth. When I had those experiences, and specifically with that entity in that realm, it was as if we knew each other's insides. We didn't have to speak. It wasn't like there was a telepathy, like we're hearing each other talk without, you know, in our minds. It was as if I just knew, like I'm seeing you and I know your innards, your inner consciousness, your whatever it is that your subjectivity is, and vice versa. And there wasn't need for communication to happen. It was just there, and I knew who it was, and it knew who I was. And it was a messenger. It was a from Christ, and that's the only way to answer that question. So again, we have this problem. I'm claiming to have these experiences. It sounds like you guys, you know, believe I did. Were they hallucinations or not? Is the question. I say no. Why? Because of my epistemology. You say big deal. And so, do the experiences denote anything? Can't be verified if they do or not. So it's basically an epistemological issue, which is.
Let's dig into that. Why do you think that it's more likely that these were supernatural instead of a hallucination?
Oh, it's only, like I said, I've said it a couple times, it's just an epistemological, like I see you.
Yeah, what do you mean by it's an epistemological thing? What do you mean by that?
I have an epistemological mindset where I'm awake and I see these three fellows, and my consciousness tells me I'm awake and you guys are real.
Okay,
I can come up with all kinds of arguments that your dreams.
Crazy question. If I were to feed you a fuck ton of mushrooms and you were to see the room move around you, would you believe that the room is actually moving, or would you believe that you're having an altered experience and that the room isn't actually moving?
Like I said earlier, I've done that, and I've actually analyzed that, you know, the waving walls and stuff, knowing that, I mean, you're seeing it, but my epistemology told me that this was a hallucination.
Okay, so when you're having a lucid dream, let's say you sleep and you're dreaming and you feel like you're moving through things, and then you wake up afterwards, do you think that last experience was a real thing where you were moving in another dimension, or do you think you were just having a dream?
Yeah, that's a good one, because there are some dreams we have where we think they're real, right? I mean, and then you wake up like, oh.
Do you think I'm not asking some people think, some people do. I'm asking you, when you have a dream, do you think it's real?
There have been times where I did, yeah. And then you wake up and then you realize it wasn't.
Okay. So you realize after. So what I'm asking you is, okay, stop saying epistemology. That's not what this means here. What is why do you believe that the experience that you had was real and not a dream or hallucination? That's what I'm asking. Why?
Oh, well, I want to say epistemology because.
Okay, when you say epistemology, what does epistemology mean to you?
My set of beliefs based on my state of consciousness. and what I think is what my consciousness tells me is real,
okay,
not real.
I'm asking you to explain what that is. Like, what are your set of beliefs based on your consciousness? What do you mean?
I believe you're real. I believe I'm not dreaming you, and that I'm awake and that you're real. And you're separate from me outside of my consciousness.
Okay, but this doesn't get us to this doesn't get us to.
I can't verify any thoughts, but I believe you do.
Okay. This doesn't get us to having a hallucination and believing that hallucination was real, though. What I'm trying to figure out is, what do you believe fundamentally? What higher order truth do you believe in that makes it so that this experience that you had is beyond understanding through any physical sense?
I think I saw. I mean, just like I see you, I saw something that was real that others have not seen.
Okay, but when you're on the influence of a hallucinogenic drug, you know that's not real. When you're lucid dreaming, you know that that's not real. Why do you believe that this is real? What separates those other experiences from this experience you had?
For the same reason I believe you're real. It's the same mindset.
That's not the answer to my question. You have two experiences. You're using empirical investigative tools to determine they're not true. Tripping under psychedelics, having a dream.
But this is not empirical information.
Yes, it is. You were using reasonable investigative processes. One, you're sleeping, so you don't believe it's real. I assume that's why you think dreams aren't real, because you were sleeping when it happens, and because you said you wake up and it's not real. And the other, you're under the influence of a drug, and you know that the drug impacts your brain, which controls your sensory information, which leads you to believe things aren't real. So now I'm asking you, so you seem to think you had a premonition. Why couldn't that have been similarly either some dream or some other hallucination, rather than some reaching into an extra dimension? Why do you believe that that experience was more real than the other two that you've been able to determine are false?
For the same reason that I know that I can experience you as more real right now than the psychedelic experience and the dream experience.
What is that reason? What if you say for the same reason? What is the reason?
It's an experiential set that I exist in now, just like you exist in an awakened state. And
okay, where did you get? Wait. What was your master's degree in?
Philosophy.
What special? What was your specialty?
Metaphysics.
What is metaphysics?
Ontology. The study of time, space.
Metaphysics?
The study of well, usually it's a set of ontological categories, but so you can also say it's studying non-observable aspects of reality.
No.
Ontology.
That's super. No, wait, stop. That's not true. That's not. No. That's not what metaphysics is. Metaphysics and supernatural are two totally different things. Metaphysics does not mean supernatural.
Unless supernatural exists, right?
Right. I'm not.
Metaphysics deals with.
Well, hang on. Hold on, because he says he's a master's degree. He says he's a master's degree in philosophy. Metaphysics doesn't mean supernatural. I mean, it could include theories of supernatural, but okay. There's just a lot of very
supernatural.
Metaphysics. People that study metaphysics study things that are supernatural a lot. Like, I mean, if you go look up the typical metaphysician in a university, a lot of them are studying God and time. Now, time is empirical. I mean, you're studying things that are not scientific.
Time could be
time isn't scientific.
Temporal things. Well,
there are temporal things. Relativity is a scientific theory about time and space.
Yeah, but there's also metaphysics dealing with time. When you have like Platonism and reductionism and things. There's a lot of metaphysics dealing with time that are not dealing with scientific aspects of time, right?
Wait. If time is observable, point to it right now. You can't. You can point to a clock, but that's plastic and metal.
We can measure the impact of time, and we have all sorts of theories relating to time that we can use to make accurate predictions of the universe. That's like
you have you have a measurement of one state of reality and another, and this is Hume 101. Then you, in your mind, associate the two in a causal relationship.
When we talk about time is subsumed by physics right now, not by Hume, not by philosophy. Like, we have a way of understanding time in a very physics.
All those physicists are leaning on philosophers of science, like University of Michigan's
hold on. Firstly, a lot of physicists fucking hate philosophy of science for a lot of different reasons. So that's not even necessary. Okay, hold on. Also, no. Also, the philosophy of science doesn't say anything about our understanding of time in like a quantum mechanical sense, or in anything having to do with like theory of relativity.
I got 4 books on my shelf right over here that are going to contradict what you're saying. If you go look up philosophy of time, quantum physics, you're going to see whole armies of people working in universities, some in physics departments, most in philosophy departments, that are studying what is the ontology of time. So that's not a correct statement you just made. Quentin Smith, the guy I got my master's degree under, is one. He's published in quantum physics journals and more in philosophy, and especially his time.
So all of the math equations and all of the actual empirical data and everything that physicists do that's philosophy, or
time is an idea in your mind.
No, time is not just time is how do you think things like GPS satellites and everything work? No. Time dilation and things, these are actual measured empirical events that happen. Like, we have theories that are predicated upon understanding how space-time works.
Tell me what it looks like.
I tried. Here, you guys can have at it. I don't think this guy actually has a degree in philosophy. And I feel like
I know what he's saying. No, I know what he's saying, Destiny.
No. It's not a matter of that he doesn't actually know what he's talking about.
This is
like I am a music dropout, and I know that most of what he's saying is actually not true. Like, I could drag on a friend in physics, and I could drag on friends in philosophy that will sit here and like ridicule the fuck, because this guy is talking like a guy that just came out of high school with like atheist 101 ideas. Like, he has a very poor understanding of how logic or reason works. He has almost no philosophical foundations for any of his ideas, and he's trying to make statements on time that are really well understood by most physicists. I know this, and I'm like a college flunky, so I don't understand.
Okay,
and this
let me see if I can parse this out, because I happen to agree with him on what he's talking about. To be honest with you, I think Jeff is actually right on a lot of this stuff when it comes to temporal things, and I'll explain why. There's two different aspects when you come to time. Time is actually considered to be the way we look at time. The arrow time is from one entropic state to another. So as entropy goes up, that's the direction of time. But it's also the difference between states. So in philosophy, if I'm looking at time from a Platonist point of view rather than from a reductionist point of view, then if nothing changed in the universe, would time be an actual thing? Would it have any kind of ontology? This goes into philosophy. It has nothing to do with science. It actually goes into pure philosophy states. If time is an independent construct that is just more than a change of differences between one state to another, and that definitely is metaphysics. I mean, time falls under metaphysics. It really actually does.
But like space-time, the dimension of space-time and matter bending space-time, this is a very real thing that is studied in...
That's different. That's
an idea.
What do you mean? No, it's not just an idea. This is studied in physics. We use this to coordinate GPS satellites.
This isn't just an idea.
No, it's...
Well, it is. Okay. Listen to me very carefully. There's something called scientific realism and scientific instrumentalism.
I know what scientific realism is, and I know what instrumentalism is.
I'm a scientific instrumentalist, so I don't care whether Einstein's theories are actually the way ontology is.
I understand what you mean by being an instrumentalist, and I understand the ideas of incommensurability, and I understand that we can be an anti-realist for these topics, but whether or not we are or not an anti-realist, we can still agree that time refers to something that can be measured, and it's not just a quaint, like, random idea. Like, it is a very real thing that we use and rely on a daily basis to make sure, like, our stuff on planet Earth works. Like, time is a dimension that is carved by matter, is something that we, like, this is understood in physics. Like, it's not a mystery or a philosophical thought. Like, it's actually something measured.
Well, then what does it look like? If you can measure, you can see it. What does it look like?
What does oxygen look like? Do you think that's not real?
I can feel it right here. I feel it. It's of other
really?
sense,
You can feel oxygen? Tell me what the percentage is of the oxygen in the air around you then.
Ontologically, time is illusion to me. I don't think time exists.
I want him to tell me what the percentage of the oxygen is in the atmosphere around him. I really want to know this. If you can feel it around him.
Well, wait, you said air, and I said or oxygen. I mean, I know that I've been told this stuff I feel is oxygen, so I use that label as oxygen. I mean, you could use air, whatever. All I know is that when I do this, I feel something cool on my face, and I assume there's something there.
That's a bad analogy, though, because we can see oxygen.
Wait, no, wait. Do you feel gravity pulling you down into the earth right now?
Pardon?
Do you feel gravity pulling you down into the ground right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's matter curving space-time.
That's a theory of what you've got an experience of matter and things falling like this. Space-time curvature is one interpretation of that, of what's happening, which uses metaphysical concepts such as space, such as time. This is not, I don't think, real controversy. Most philosophers of physics agree. Sorry?
There's two major ways of looking at time. There's looking at it as a fourth-dimensional space-time continuum, and then what's called the Minkowski approach. And there's also the neo-Lorentzian, where space-time is separate. You have 3 dimensions plus the temporal, which how it usually is for most, generally speaking. If I say, hey, Thomas, I want you to meet me at this latitude, this longitude, and this altitude, I'm now going to give you another dimension by which time to meet me at, right? So there's 4 dimensions involved. That's this neo-Lorentzian approach to these types of things. But the way science looks at it is space-time is intricately related. However, ontologically, we don't know if there is such a thing as space-time. It just happens to be that the modeling works. That's why in most of the times, we only care if the model represents what we think is reality. I don't think we actually know base reality. I don't think we have a way of ever measuring what base reality is. I'm fine with that and having that epistemic limit.
What you just said, I think I agree with that. Not as extreme as you, but what you just said, I'm pretty sure I agree with that. So the idea that we are measuring things or proxying things, but they might not truly represent anything at all, or what they do represent are things that we don't necessarily represent. But I don't think that's the same thing that the other guy was saying.
Possible. You might be right. You might be right. And this goes to what's called model dependent realism too. I mean, Stephen Hawking, he put a lot of effort into how we develop these types of models. I mean, but Jeff, I mean, do you agree with what I said? I mean, can you separate physics and metaphysics to the point where time can be constructed either way? You can look at it from something we can measure. Destiny's right. We can measure time. But you can also say from a philosophical standpoint that time is illusion. A lot of people do have that belief that time, like free will, is just something that's illusionary.
Yeah, I mean, the philosophers talk about what's called the specious present, and that's, you know, we have this experience of time, and that's all. It's the only thing I think is detectable, which should make sense, because all that's detectable is that which is in our experience, whether we're measuring something, it's an external reality, or if we're detecting something we believe is only in our personal reality, which can't be verified by others. We're locked in experience. I've never been outside my experience looking in on myself.
You can't.
And all of our experiences, I can't verify that any of you guys have experience, and you can't verify that I do. We just believe each other.
But we assume it, right? I assume destiny exists. Right. I mean, I can say that I know that it exists because I go by theories of knowledge. I know that he exists.
All non-beliefs aren't the same. Like, for instance, I can't truly know that somebody else experiences a conscious state of mind, but I also can't know that if there's a teapot floating in the asteroid belt. These are two different kinds of things that I can't know. I can inductively reason my way to one, and I can inductively say that the other is highly unlikely. Like, these two things are not... What?
Why can't you know?
That's a good point.
I know there's no teapot in space. I know this for knowledge. I can justify that using theories of knowledge. I know you exist.
You're exactly right.
To truly know that 100%, we would have to measure every single part of the asteroid belt.
Well, no,
I mean,
no,
like, we could know that.
You don't. You're confusing knowledge with epistemic certainty and Descartes' certainty. And Cartesian certainty is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge doesn't require certainty. It's okay, and that's, I think, a mistake a lot of people make.
Okay, sure.
You say,
okay,
I don't.
Can I just say
there is no certainty in knowledge?
Well,
what's that?
There's probably over 7 billion teapots actually that are flying around in orbit around the sun right now. They're just all on Earth.
Fair point.
Nice.
Fair point. Good point. Nicely saved there, Thomas.
All I'm saying is that if somebody doesn't have an answer to one thing, it doesn't mean that every single thing that you don't have an answer to is all of a sudden like the same type of not having an answer to something, if that makes sense.
The evolutionist doesn't have an answer. Yes. The Christian doesn't. The physicist, no theory is complete.
Okay, but the incompleteness of all theories doesn't all of a sudden make them equal to each other. Like, just because a scientist can't completely explain everything with evolution doesn't mean all of a sudden creationism is equally viable.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The postmodernists will disagree with you, but I happen to agree with what you just said. Yeah, I mean, you're basically saying some theories are more successful.
What does this have to do with postmodernism?
Well, postmodernists are what you just said. They think all the theories are equal. The guy in the rainforest saying that the water god created the universe is equal to string theory.
I'll kill myself if this guy had a master's in philosophy. I'll kill myself if he has a master's. I'll do it live on stream.
Are you saying I just misrepresented postmodernism?
I think I never heard that before. Postmodernism to me is some weird thing that came out of like trying to explain it, the Age of Enlightenment. That just. But well, you know what? I have. You know what? I'm going to actually say, John, maybe you have. I have heard. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard postmodernism when it deals like standpoint theory, and in standpoint theory, then they're relating different types of theories to each other. But I don't know if that's.
It's just look up deconstructionism, and you'll get to what I'm saying. Postmodernism involves the idea that all theories are not completely certain. I'm not a postmodernist. I like the theory, but I don't hold the theory. I think that what Destiny said, some theories that I see, some epistemological experiences, some empirical experiences are more successful describing my experience than others. So I'm going to say those are better than the rain god and the Venezuelan jungle being the creator, which I have no epistemology evidence or anything to support. So what I'm saying is we don't need to discuss postmodernism. It'll kill the audience, and I don't think it's the wrong theory anyway.
Well, I don't think that any of us here are postmodernists anyways.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I don't think anybody is a postmodernist here. I mean, we can get JP.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, let's. I shouldn't have.
I find postmodernism to be bizarre. I think it's. I think I'm going to say this on record. We got 600 people watching, and I know it's going to bite me in the ass. But to me, postmodernism is one big troll on philosophy. It's like the Ayn Rand modern version of Ayn Rand objectivism. It's just, I don't know if I take these people seriously when it comes to postmodernism. But that's just me. Do with it what you will. So.
Oh, they're serious. Go look at their artwork and the way they live.
Serious, but it's just like a long troll game. It does seem like a troll to me. It really does. So
I think it doesn't agree with my own experience where, like I just said, some of my theoretical systems in my mind and so forth are better than others. So why wouldn't I go with those versus the ones that are less? So that, in my mind, that destroys postmodernism. So it's an interesting theory.
That's beautiful. That's you're hitting on something that really pulls us back to the very beginning of our conversation of, how do you know that your experience of God is actual evidence for the existence of this God? Because you're going out and you're preaching this to people, and you're teaching it as fact to a congregation, and spreading this as some knowledge that you've encountered.
I actually am a pastor working with extremely poor people.
When you say that, you're talking about how some theories are better than others. And I look at it and I'm like, it's not just that there's, this theory is a good theory, this one's a little bit of a better theory. I think that there are theories that overlap within fields of science. So you have, like, for example, the theory of evolution by natural selection. It beat out, Lamarckian evolution because it fit not just, it fit all of this data, it fit all of the data, and it had nothing that was disproving it, whereas Lamarckian evolution didn't. And so you start seeing overlaps in, everything from, geology to, the study of genetics, and the study of paleontology, and the study of chemistry and biochemistry and physics and astrophysics and all this stuff, and like the age of the earth, and all these fields are overlapping to the point where you can say this theory is the most reliable one that we have, that, it either has absolutely no evidence to disprove it, or if it does have something that's, not quite adding up, then we're searching for a theory, actively to try to make sense of that data that still covers all of the rest of it just as well or better. And I know that that's kind of long-winded, but when I see theories like that, and I'm like, okay, this is the best way to know anything, not just because it's, hey, maybe we can know something, maybe we can't, but because within this realm of our experiences, it is the only consistent way of looking at things. It is consistent across all fields of observation. And it's that consistency to me that brings reliability in science. Because as soon as you lose consistency, as soon as it all starts contradicting itself, you have madness. So what type of theories are you putting forth that are a better replacement for that, a better replacement for all of our observations in the natural world?
Nothing. I'm making a claim that the supernatural is real. It broke through to my consciousness, not in a way, not to others. And that's not going to help a whole lot with what you just said, because I'm going to be talking about my own theory that's going to disagree with your theories that you have found successful. Now, maybe some of the ones you're explaining I also find successful. I'm going to say this one's more successful.
I'm not saying that it has to agree with my theory or disagree with my theory. I'm saying it has to purport to the evidence and not be contradicting of what we're observing.
Okay. So well, it doesn't. There is no evidence for what I've said. As far as it contradicting, then you'd have to go into, this would be another audience killer. So I don't know if we're going to go here. We'll have to go to the whole thing of, is Genesis 4.3 billion years, or is it 6 days? You have to go through all that to see if it's really a contradiction. You guys are probably going to say it is. I respect that. And I'm going to probably say somehow or another it's not. And we're going to probably just bang each other over the head for 6 hours, and the audience will be 4 people.
Well, real quick, okay. Well, where do you stand on that? I mean, I have to ask. I mean, do you accept the science, the fact the Earth is 4.5 billion years old? Do you accept the fact that evolution has been going on for close to 4 billion years, that we are the end result of long evolutionary processes, that speciation occurs? Or are you taking that from what you've experienced and say, you know what, I'm going to discount all the science in lieu of whatever belief system you want to have?
Well, Genesis 1, I don't think it's till verse 4 or 5 that they start talking about the days. I mean, there could have been 4 point something billion years there, or maybe there was 5 seconds. I don't know. As far as Genesis correlating with evolution, that's tough to do, you know.
Why do you think Genesis is more reliable than the forensics that we're using to observe the nature of reality, using our latest instruments?
I'm not on this specific show. What I'd want to say is, I don't know exactly what the Bible's trying to say in Genesis 1 on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't know. I know some biology. I know some physics. More, I studied, you know, my undergrad's anthropology. It was behavioral anthropology, so there's some biology there. I've studied a little on my own too. I did study astrophysics for 2 years at Michigan State before I transferred to New Mexico to do that double major in anthropology biology. So I know a little bit of physics, but not enough to make a good claim. I've learned from experience, and so I'm kind of want to dodge that. You know, wherever the truth goes, I'm good with it. Could go either way in my mind. Now you guys are going to say it can't go one way, you know, young Earth and no evolution stuff. And my response to that is, I'm of the belief that Christianity probably could be made to work with that if needed. And is that a cop out? Yep. Absolutely.
Dusty, what do you think about that? I mean, can religion and science kind of go hand in hand? Because I think that once you discount science in lieu of religion, I think you make a mistake.
No, you can't. Science and religion use two totally different processes to investigate things. These two things can never go hand in hand. You can flex and bend religion to try to eventually make it fit the molds that science rigorously carves out, but these two things are completely and totally incommensurable to one another. The only way that religion ever works into science is changing whatever observations you made to fit whatever's been investigated by science. The processes are totally different.
It goes back to what I think that's exactly what I want. That's what I really want to say right there is, an experience of faith, which I would say is an experience of God's presence in some varying level, is simply doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in universities. It's like they're on the opposite sides of the streets and there's a barrier between the two. Now, a lot of people want to say, no, let's merge science and religion. I'm like, I don't know about that, because when I read the Bible, it talks about how those two realms are quite opposed to each other. And there's a lot of talk in the Bible about how the world is corrupt and there's evil creatures in it and it's fallen and it's all messed up and it's horrific and so forth. And then the supernatural realm is the opposite. Now, it does say in the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven. So you got kind of that problem there. But then the Bible will say, well, the one has been corrupted by sin, so therefore they're still resembling each other, but one is diseased, the other isn't. So you can go on and on and on. But in general, I want to agree with what Destiny just said, that I'm not going to sit here and try to bridge those realms. I had an experience which I'm going to be trying to figure out the rest of my life, which blasted out a lot, not necessarily killed any faith I have in science, but definitely it replaces being the standard of what I thought was true. And now I've got a new standard. And do I make science conform to it? It just depends on how much science I learn to see if that is possible or not. There could be let me just be open and honest. I mean, there could be a point, certainly, where I will I reject real good empirical information in science? No. But there's a lot of garbage out there, like Lawrence Krauss talking about the virtual part. Well, that's not garbage. I mean, the Casimir effect does seem to indicate there's the virtual particle field. So I don't mean to say garbage. But what I meant, I was thinking more string theory and stuff. I mean, that's just a mathematical philosophy. Garbage is the wrong word, but it's not science. I mean, but I'm talking about real good empirical. Superconductivity is real.
Wait, what does that mean?
String theory science. I actually have a book right here on string theory called The Cosmic Landscape by Leonard Susskind. It's mathematical science. Whether it be the case, I don't know, but it's certainly science. I mean, it explains the point like particles, explains what gluons are, and what's that?
Can you verify? Okay. String theory wants to say a gluon is a type of one or two dimensional sheet. I mean, can you verify that? I don't think you can yet.
Well, mathematics, that's what it is. It's mathematics explaining what a point like particle is, whether it be a gluon, a quark, or electron. These are the theories that we start off with. Which we develop.
String theory is not science. There are problems with string theory. The predictions are very hard to test. Obviously, it's got problems, but string theory is still like the leading theory for unifying things like gravity and like quantum mechanics together. I like this idea that they're not
quantum gravity and general relativity.
But like you keep saying that something isn't science, but like science is just a method, and a scientific theory is just a way to describe.
Science is what is detectable by your senses.
No, that's empiricism.
What quanta or whatever?
Right.
Or what's
that's natural?
Well, empiricism
you're saying
knowledge.
You're saying you can have science without empiricism.
Well, I think you're making a huge mistake there.
Empiricism, then you may be right.
I think you're making a huge mistake here. Science is a method, and science does incorporate things that we don't have validation for yet, but that doesn't matter, because if it's a theory, or excuse me, a hypothesis, I would say more than a theory, even though it is string theory because it's mathematical theory. But when we first posited the neutrino in order to determine the missing energy from a decay state, that we didn't have any facts that it was an ontological necessity. We didn't know that the neutrino existed, but it was posited because it explained observations. And that's how science begins. We have an explanation for something. We work on it to see if we can find evidence for it and deconfirmational evidence for falsifying. Are there some problems with these types of methodology and falsificationism? Yes, but it's still, I think, the best system we have. And to say that string theory isn't science, I think, is a huge mistake, honestly.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I just am going through, like, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe I mean, I studied a lot of philosophy of science in school, you know, going from Francis Bacon, Descartes, and they were very high, you know, if it's not empirical, it's not science. And when I got into anthropology, they kind of had the same view. If you can't point to it, it's not science. If that's not true, if nowadays we're calling things that are theoretical science, then you're correct. And I would need to change my definition. But right now, if you can't point to it, I want to call it theory, philosophy. That's why, you know, it goes back to the whole, is time real? And if I can't point to it, I don't know. Like, you know, it's often said, if you can't show it, you don't know it. You know.
Well, I personally don't really agree with that adage. I kind of disagree with Arn on that. But back, you were exposed to a hypothetical deductive method, right? I mean, this is one of the things in philosophy that prevalent, but there are problems with hypothetical.
I taught logic and critical thinking at University of Michigan Dearborn.
Okay, because one of these days I am going to be doing a presentation on what's called the Raven paradox, which deals with some of the problems with the hypothetical deductive method, and what determines what the confirmation. I love that paradox. That's not even a paradox, really, but it's brilliant because it shows
like every single Raven you see is like is evidence of like the fuck. I ran through this problem.
Yeah, what it is that whenever you have something that implies something, P implies Q, you have the contrapositive. Would be not Q implies not P. So everything that's not black, that's not a Raven, is actually confirmation of the fact that all Ravens are black. It's a logical argument because it logically follows, but doesn't really make sense as far as confirmation to the hypothesis. And I will be having a discussion on that because I think it's people have asked me to. But this goes to some of the problems with the verification method, what we have for confirmation of science. So we can posit things like string theory, doesn't make it not science. I think that by saying that, you're going to turn a lot of people off to your position, because this is how things get started. We have a hypothesis that's mathematically viable.
A lot of academics that agree with what I said. If you can't see it, it's not science.
I totally disagree with that. I don't know any scientist that says that. Yeah,
Descartes.
What do you mean?
Descartes dead. I hate to break it to you. Descartes isn't really a modern scientist. He's been dead.
What do you mean by purely talking visual, or are you talking things that we can detect naturally? Because
if anybody Google right now who invented calculus, you're going to find out that Leibniz and Descartes go together.
Leibniz and Newton, and I go for Leibniz. I'm a Leibniz kind of guy. But
okay, all right. But if you Google it, you'll find out Descartes and Leibniz did the same thing at the same time.
Anyway, go ahead. You say if you can't see it, but there's lots of things that, you said you can't see oxygen. We actually can detect oxygen, and we have instruments to detect things, and we have things called electron microscopes where we can observe, the ultra small, and actually observe them using instruments that our senses on their own can't detect. And there are things that we can use.
So we see stuff we didn't see before.
Yeah, we can determine, what are stars made of using spectroscopy. And we can actually look at the signatures, the chemical signatures that match the chemical signatures for these elements that we have locally on Earth. We can use mass spectrometry and whatnot. So all of this stuff, when you say if we can't see it, it isn't science or it isn't real. Like, what do you mean by see? Like, there's, are you just talking about the visual? Are you talking about
it's not going to be scientific. That's what I mean.
What about through instrumentation? What about through experimentation?
Well, I can see the computer screen showing me the spectral readings of the star, so I have empirical information through the instrumentation.
Okay, and what we're saying is you take all of that empirical data and you form logical theories around that, and that process
that's where philosophy starts.
That's how science is too.
That's what people like to say now, but I don't think that's right. I think it's
Jeff,
you've got the empiricism, and then as soon as you got the dots on the graph, as soon as you draw a line through it, that's theory, which is philosophy,
Jeff,
and that's where problems come in.
When we look at the stars, right, and we say these stars have these certain processes, like a proton-proton reaction, we did not know until very recently that what we couldn't demonstrate it using things on Earth. We were looking for what's called the neutrinos from it. It was called the missing mass problem. And these neutrinos that we would expect to see coming from these events, we weren't seeing. We didn't have the skills to detect them because they're very, very hard to detect. They don't interact with matter. You need very large vats of chlorine and water and these scintillation detectors to detect it, or some type of detector. I know there's scintillation, but
you're talking about dark matter.
But we eventually discovered these neutrinos. And that was confirmation of the hypothesis and the theory that these stars exist because of these fusion processes by proton-proton reactions.
Now, I mean,
this is how it all works. This is how science progresses.
People have those water tanks in the underground. They think that neutrinos are doing it. I mean, it could be. There's also a lot of.
Yes, because it's true now. It's a fact. It's an ontological fact now. It's not a matter of just I believe. It's knowledge now. There's a difference.
If you go,
knowledge is belief to a higher degree of standard, right?
Turn this over to dark matter. That it's kind of the same idea. Weakly interacting particle that's supposed to, be some 70% of the universe mass or something that we're going to try to detect and so forth. When there's dark matter detectors all over the place, blah, blah, blah. When we get a hit, I mean, to just say done, I mean, you do have to question that a little bit. It could be the dark matter particles discovered. And that'd be awesome. But, I mean, if you go look up dark matter, for example, physicists on Google, you're going to see there's a very large number of them that are really still questioning if dark matter isn't just some kind of mistake we've made. When they first, detected those galaxy arms not traveling at the right speed and questioning, then they're questioning gravity and they think it's more mass there. And I'm thinking, why don't we question the theory of gravity that Newton developed on a terrestrial landscape? Versus, these huge distances. I mean, maybe gravity needs to be adjusted rather than assuming there's, 10 times more mass there. Pardon?
We have evaluated Newton's theory of gravity. It was called Einstein's
Vera Rubin, who discovered dark matter, used Newton's mechanics to come to that.
Well,
go Google that.
What happened was we can actually determine. Yeah, they use relativity. We can actually look at these galaxies and we can see there's an effect of gravitational forces. Now, the only thing we know that causes gravity. Hang on. The only thing that we know we have that affect gravity, and if you look at the positive curvature on the space-time tensor for these field equations that Einstein has, what causes that is mass, right? So mass causes the curvature of space-time, and we can actually formulate this in a mathematical equation. So we know that something is causing space-time to warp. We know that something that is causing a gravitational force to exist, and that is mass. So what that mass is, we call that dark matter because there's no photons being emitted from it. We don't visually see it in any way. That's why it's called dark matter. It's matter, it's mass, but we can't visually see it. It's what it's actually comprised of. We don't know. We know that it exists. We know there's something there.
I think the way I would say it is it's most probable that it wasn't
detected. There's a difference between visually observing and detecting something. And when we measure the effects that something has and we detect it, that doesn't mean that we've physically, visually seen it, but it still is measuring on our instruments.
Justin, you want to weigh on that? You look like you're dying on the dark matter stuff. Please.
I mean, I generally agree with what you guys are all saying about this.
Destiny, can you hear us, Destiny?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think my thing cut out for a second. Can you say that again?
Wait.
Yeah, do you want to weigh on the whole the dark matter thing real quick? Let Destiny get in here. Do you want to weigh on to that? Because, I happen to like physics, right? My background was in the nuclear field.
I like this stuff.
Dark matter is like the most important, unsolved question, in space, or maybe in all of physics right now at this time. Yeah, it's an insanely fucking heated topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What was fuck? Was this just posted recently? Well, fuck. I don't know if it's even that big of a deal, but I think it was a week ago. Wasn't there something published where there was a theory that there were certain types? Oh, it was anti-gravity, or things that have. Fuck, it was negative gravity. Did you read anything about this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Negative. What's negative energy?
No. Was it negative? No, I think it was specifically negative gravity. It was the idea that space-time could be curved up and that it would push things away.
What
and
it does is it produces a positive curvature from not mass, but from there's something called the Auxiliary metric, which is a way of actually distorting space-time to go faster than the speed of light, although you're not actually moving faster than c. It's the space-time's moving. But it requires very exotic forms of energy and mass, which is negative energy, which can result in a positive curvature, if I'm explaining it correctly. But yes, there are theories out there.
I think it was just like a sexy paper. I don't know if it'll turn out. Yeah, that'd be real. But yeah, it was right.
So we are running out of time. This was actually fascinating.
This is cool stuff, though.
I'm telling you, these types of discussions go by so quick. We can have like some conversations that drag on for eternity, but things like this, it's already been almost 2 hours.
Question? And it's going to take us back about an hour in the conversation, but just I keep wanting to kind of pull back to how that your experience is reliable. And I want to approach it a slightly different way. And I want to ask if you could artificially stimulate it by finding certain chemical pathways in your brain and either stimulating them magnetically or chemically or electrically, and you had the exact same experience, but you had it artificially induced in a laboratory, would you still see that as proof of God? Or your God specifically?
Like if right now so I had the experience. This is a cool question. So if somebody can reach inside my brain, zap the neurons in a way that would make me experience the exact same thing.
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Yeah, because I mean that's what happens with epileptics. That you can zap their brain and they'll have actual real memories of actual things that happened when they were 5 years old and stuff. So the brain stimulation does lead to real memories. So yeah, sure.
Well, no,
maybe the supernatural would break through again by my brain being altered. What I'm saying is, then I would go to the next step there. Sorry.
Okay, let me clarify. So, are you familiar with? There's a scientist named Michael Persinger who he invented a helmet called the God helmet.
The God helmet.
And when you put it on,
University of Ottawa.
It magnetically induces out-of-body experiences and these feelings of supernatural spiritual connection. There's also a guy. Do you know Olaf Blanc?
No.
He's done similar work, but instead of using magnetic stimulation, he actually puts electrodes on the temporal parietal junction in the brain and stimulates it, and he can do pretty much the same thing, but like really intense spiritual and even out-of-body experiences that they're pinpointing the specific regions where this is happening. And they're like, you know what, we can stimulate this in anybody, whether or not you've ever had a spiritual or supernatural experience at all. Like I say supernatural, it's let's throw that word out again. I
know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
You feel like you're experiencing something paranormal. You feel like you're experiencing something bigger than yourself. And even sometimes you feel like you're floating outside of your body, even though you're not. And
that's experienced that before. Well, most of us, I think,
if you could have that exact thing artificially, would that artificial experience be proof of a deity? Because you know what's happening, you know all the chemical stuff that's going on, you know what's happening in the neurons, or at least someone some expert might know more than you. They're able to kind of pinpoint and recreate it. I just don't see how that's reliable, especially when they're doing that same exact procedure to you and to someone else and to someone else who have different cultural experiences, and they're coming to they're seeing different gods and different beings and different things.
Culture mixes in with all that. The question is, can we, when we manually alter our brains, which we do with psychedelic drugs or antidepressants or the God helmet or whatever, do those entities and realities experience denote something that is real, or are they imagination? It's the same question we've been having. And if the same experience I had was inducible by a helmet, I would be forced to, in my own personal non-scientific account, have to say that it's real based on my epistemology. And then again, that would lead to, did alteration of brain chemistry lead to me seeing something that others don't see but is actually real? Or is it
saying you would be more likely to conclude that rather than your initial experience that you had, purely, without any kind of helmet, any kind of drugs or anything, that rather than saying, hey, wait a second, maybe that's just kind of a neurological fluke, a malfunction in the brain, that we can recreate that malfunction.
You could object to what happened to me by saying that.
You're saying rather than coming to that conclusion, rather than coming to that conclusion, you come to the conclusion that, hey, this little metal hunk that you throw on your head somehow stimulates the God connection.
It's just like Paul in Acts 9. He was the guy who killed Christians, and he has a vision of Christ on the road, and his old life is over. That's another way. That's sort of a new way to say what I'm trying to say.
We know these visions can be caused by normal means. I think that's the point that Thomas is getting at. We can induce them. We know that there's naturalistic explexionays for these things, or possible explanations.
But do the entities experience to know something real?
We really got to wrap this up. It's 2 hours.
You guys,
I'm going to be reading this.
I'd say
this is fascinating.
Chemically real, but not.
There's
reliable proof of supernatural stuff.
I'm going to be having an after show on my personal channel after this. Anybody's invited to join, just let me know and I'll get you the link. I'm going to read these super chats because a couple of them are questions. Hopefully I have a special guest showing up. Somebody that is a very prevalent name. They have asked to join the after show, although he's doing something right now, but hopefully I'll have him join. So I might have another surprise, but let me read these super chats because they do deal with your guys' questions. So Mo for $2 says, it seems Jeff worships the Bible, not God. I don't think you worship the Bible, do you?
Okay. Both. It says in John 6:63 that the word is spirit. The Bible and the God. The Bible is supposed to be
the physical book.
Supernatural, huh?
But do you worship the physical book?
No, not the atoms and stuff that make up the book. The word is spirit, is what John 6:63 says. So the words when you read them are you're interacting with spirit if you're possessed by Christ.
Sarah B at $2. Is Satan part of?
Why is this surprising? I don't understand.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes.
Okay.
Of all the things, why is that any? Yeah. Sarah B at $2. Is Satan part of reality? That would be a Christian ontology. Yeah. Wicked Cake $2. Are all things are dreams of Astaroth. Okay. Is
I like all things are dreams. That's kind of interesting.
Is that a World of Warcraft one, or is that a Lovecraft? I don't remember.
No.
Crazy Mummy P $5. Am yet to hear Jeff actually state method he used to differentiate between hallucinations and supernatural experience beyond saying because I know. I don't think you really have.
All I got is to my epistemology reports that, and that's not going to help us too much, you know.
Okay.
Oh, he may have a point on me.
I think he does have a point.
Yeah.
Honestly. Jake 3D $2. Sadly, I'm working.
I respect Jeff's honesty on that.
That's why I called atheists to go on, because atheists are usually more honest than Christians. So I respect your guys' honesty also. But
yeah, and you know what? And I'm gonna say that as well. I mean, I appreciate you coming on. I think that your conclusions are faulty, especially for somebody who prides themselves in philosophy, but at least you're willing to question it. At least you're putting it out there as not a certainty claim, and that's going to be a completely different thing. When you start saying things like I'm absolutely certain of this and this and this, and that leads to me to deity, I have to really question that. But I don't think you're actually doing that. I think you're doing the best of your ability to provide a rational explanation for what you experienced. And for those of us who experience things like that, I think we come to different conclusions. But anyways, Jake 3D $2. Sadly, I'm working. Can't watch. No tangible proof. I don't think it really deals with proof.
Before you read the next super chat.
Yep.
So I really have to pee. So whatever you do, nobody else play for chats. And now they're just gonna blow it up. I'm gonna be here till midnight. I'm gonna have to get a cup.
We're gonna be wrapping up in a few minutes. I'm gonna let everybody have their last word, and Destiny's gonna take us out. Athena, Goddess of Wisdom, $5. I really wish people would stop bringing up string theory when they don't even understand what it is. String theory is complicated. Even I don't have a really good grasp of string theory, and I've even read Susskind, and it's very difficult. There's like 500 10 to the 500 power different worlds out there, dimensions and of the landscape. When he's talking about the cosmic landscape, 10 to the 500 power.
That's really a good point. I want to just say, when I'm talking about string theory, I've got a couple books I've read, and man, these guys that are in the universities that are delving into it, they may just know what I don't know, and I may be stupid for everything I said about it. You know,
I think
Brian
that's elegant.
The more anyone learns about any topic, the more we realize we don't know.
Oh yeah, the more you look into some of the stuff, the more you realize, yeah, this is beyond my limit, right? I do that all the time. I get interested in something, and then I realize this is beyond my ability to really teach myself, but I want to have a basic understanding. Brian Stevens, $2. Can you show God?
No, God's not empirical.
No. Brian Stevens, again, $5. Thank you, Brian. Lots of academics that agree. Name one that you can check with. I smell BS. Yeah, I think you might be a little bit going over the your assertions on that. I don't really know too many academics that would probably agree with you on that. But if you do, bring it to us. Some of the things that you were saying, like string theory isn't science, and
well, I'm not. Yeah, you know what?
Pure empiricism.
Corrected.
I think you're confusing logical positivism with science.
I'm going to say that person and you guys are right, and I'm wrong on that because I don't know string theory. I'm a philosopher.
Okay. And you're not a logical positivist, I would assume, right?
I used to be, but not. I like that philosophy, but no.
Really? Okay.
I mean, Crazy I'm close, monkey. But I mean, you can't be a Christian or logical positivist.
Yeah. Crazy Monkey, $2. The neutrinos, they're mutating. Okay. Brian Stevens, another $10. Thank you, Brian. Could you be wrong about your religion? And that's a great question. We're going to leave that on. I'm gonna let you answer that. Then Destiny's going to take us out because we do got to wrap up. But can you answer that?
Yeah.
Could you be wrong about your religious beliefs?
If I'm wrong about seeing this pen and believing it's real, I could be wrong about my religious beliefs.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, on our after show, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to dive into meteorological naturalism and can you be wrong about certain things? And I hold the position that certain things you can't be wrong about. And I will go into explanations as to why. And I will talk about Descartes' demon. I'll talk about brain in a vat. And I'm going to talk about what's called epistemic closure principle in the after show. So if you guys want to
that'll be on your channel live right now?
That'll be on my personal channel. Yeah, I'll put the link in the video description. And I'll put it in the link in the live chat if anybody wants to from here join. But anyways, Jeff, why did you after? Yeah, well, it's gonna be about 5 or 10 minutes. We're gonna go in order here and take us out. I want Thomas to go first, then Jeff, and then Destiny give us last word. Thomas, you have anything you want to plug? And by the way, thank you for coming in last notice. Here.
Oh yeah, of course. So to anyone who's not familiar with my work, I have a channel called Holy Kool-Aid. Just broke 60,000 subs. Whoop, whoop. And nice.
Yeah,
I try to take complex topics related to I don't go super deep into philosophy, although I have at times, but I mostly look into scientific ideas. I talk about religion and stuff, and I try to break them down in a way that is bite-sized. I try not to waste people's time. I try to be laser focused, and I try to make it fun and funny and add pop culture references. And I also have a podcast with Rationality Rules and Rachel Oates called the Here and How podcast as well, that explores big ideas, and it just kind of explores the past of certain ideas and then looks at the future of technological advancement related to them.
I love both those people, by the way. Rachel Oates is fantastic, and Rationality Rules is one of the more layperson philosophers that I've ever encountered that so knows his stuff I've never seen before. He's absolutely.
I'm going to check that channel out.
Yeah,
that's an interesting name.
Anyways, Jeff, why don't you give us? What is you take you? Hang on, I'm getting phone calls right now. Stop messaging me, people.
My website's praiseandlove.net, and you can go there, but I don't think anybody's going to find anything interesting. It's just got my academic papers. Go to CV. That might be. Go to CV because I think all my publications were before I was a Christian, so they're all atheist publications. So those might be of interesting. Go to the CV part, but the rest is just all Christian stuff, sermons, and blah blah blah. So, but praiseandlove.net is my site.
Okay. All right, Destiny, you're going to have the last word. Take as long as you need. Wrap this up for us. Give us your final thoughts. I'm probably sure you have a lot to say. Then I have one last super chat to read, and then we'll probably wait about 10 or 15 minutes and have an after show.
No, I mean, I think we all said pretty much what we wanted to say. Thanks for having me on. It was a fun conversation. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, again, these conversations tend to go in any direction they go. I'm not going to fault Jeff for his beliefs. I'm not an atheist and I'm not a theist. People know this. We've had these discussions. I'm just somebody who wants to know the truth, and I'm somebody that thinks that people can have reasons for why they believe certain things. And I don't think anything's wrong with questioning those justificatory reasons why we hold beliefs. But I don't fault anybody for having a belief that maybe we as people that don't believe, and by the way, I am a non-believer, I'm not going to fault them for having a particular position. I draw the line, and I'm fall on Thomas's side, that once you start putting these positions into the academic system, once you put them in the schools, once you start teaching creationism as a scientific fact, I will fight the person tooth and nail for that, right? But if a person just has a belief and they want to believe it for themselves because they think they're rational to do so, I have no dog in that fight, right? So anyways, Rez Instance, $20 Australian. Thank you, Rez, very much. He says, not all cults are religions, but all religions are cults. Only difference is religions don't pay taxes. And by the way, a lot of things about cults is formal venerable worship. So in some ways, yes, all religions can be considered to be cult-like in that degree. But anyways, thank you guys for watching this. This was a great discussion. I really like these types of things where people come on and tell us why they believe what they believe. Give about 15 minutes, head over to my channel, Steve McRae. The link is in the video description, and I'll put it one more time in the live chat. But once again, Thomas, thanks for filling in for Kyle, who's taking a few days off. He's earned it. He's having some fun. All is well with him. And so he'll be back, I think, on Sunday. Tomorrow we have a couple flat earth debates. Should be kind of interesting. But with that, good night all, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.